All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Michigan's Children's Lunch and Learn for the month of November 2021. We're so excited to have you with us. I'm Patrick Brown, Outreach Associate here at Michigan's Children. As you're coming in, we've got folks coming in. You can just say hello in the chat. We really would appreciate that. You can put your name and your program, where you're from. We'd love to see you all. We are so excited for today's discussion on the state of after school in Michigan. And I'm delighted also to have my co-conspirator at times and my partner in crime here and a wonderful friend and colleague, Terry Bannis. Terry. Oh, Terry, you're muted.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be back, and it should be a great program. Looking forward to this discussion. Thanks, Patrick.
Again, as you're coming in, welcome to our Lunch and Learn for this month. You can go into the chat and say hello. We are recording today's session as well as live streaming on Facebook, so you can always watch us there as well. We're going to dive right into our discussion. Like I said, today we're going to talk about after school in Michigan, really hot topic certainly, as we talk about state and federal investments. And as we're starting into the holiday season here and talking about enrichment activities and out of school time activities for youth and families, it's a really hot button issue right now. But we're going to start with a really focus and intent on a statewide partnership poll that Michigan's Children was a part of, and really reveal some of the results that likely voters and constituents in Michigan had to say about investing in out of school time programming. We'll have a brief overview from our school-based programming partners, and then talk with our mass partners about community-based programs. And then we've got a wonderful panel discussion with question and answers that we prepared. And then we'll leave it open for some response for you all as well. If at any time throughout today's session you've got questions, you can pop them into the chat. We'll be monitoring that. And again, welcome, and you can say hello in the chat as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Terry, and she's going to talk to a little bit about kind of the background for today's discussion and one of our work projects that we've been working on in regards to a statewide poll. Terry?
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks again for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. In the next 5 minutes, I just want to give you a brief overview of the poll that we conducted back in the last week of July and August during the pandemic. And we worked in partnership with the Skillman Foundation to initiate this poll, and it was a long poll. We asked voters about a number of issues to gauge their interest in where they saw the need to invest in children and youth. But among the poll questions were many related to after school issues, in part because that is a foundational issue of importance to the Skillman Foundation and Michigan's children. So I'd like to focus some remarks about what we found out there about those two issues. In the next 5 minutes, we'll talk about what voters had to say about making investments in kids, what their top concerns were, and where they favored making those investments. On this slide, from the outset, voters told us that they liked the idea of increasing public funding for programs and services for children and young people in Michigan. 62%, very strong supported this prospect, including about 41% who supported it strongly, 28% who opposed it, and 10% who were undecided. We also asked them if they would favor making these investments, even if it meant raising taxes. And again, the results were kind of surprising. 58% were supportive, and that was an important indicator for us. There were clear party patterns by party identification. Democrats strongly supported the proposal by 88%. Independents also supported it by 57%. And Republicans who are very tax sensitive, were not as supportive, but as we raised issues and dialogue about the importance in the investment, their support grew, and that was encouraging. Black voters were particularly supportive, 78%. White voters overall were about 58%. Women were more supportive than men, but not by much, 65 to 63%. I think it's important to impress that Michiganders are more inclined to raise new tax revenues for kids than even most Midwestern states. And we know this from our polling partners who looked at other polls that were done in other states. So that was encouraging that Michigan voters are more inclined to support tax revenues for kids than even other states. And what we also found in general was that they embrace parental support for out-of-school time providers, and they have a strong interest in the provisions of mental health services and out-of-school time programming. This is important to note because, as you know, from a lot of the controversies that have taken place at school board levels, there is among, conservative voters an interest in a strong interest in parental support. So hearing that hearing from voters that parental participation and support is something that they really favor in out-of-school time programming, which is very central to out-of-school time programming, is important to point out and something that you might want to consider continuing to talk about. So now, among the top concerns and issues related to children and youth, for Michigan voters, children and youth falling behind in school because of learning loss experienced during the pandemic was particularly keen and important and top of mind. 87% believe this is a problem. So this is something that resonates very strongly with voters, and 62% think that it's a really big problem. This is the only item in this battery of questions for which there was no partisan divide. Another big concern, and that is this idea that children are being negatively impacted by the pandemic. Democrats, Republicans, independents, it resonates with them. It has their attention. Another big concern has been inadequate help for children struggling with mental health illnesses, disorders like anxiety, depression, ADHD, and PTSD. As you can see, 79% believe it's a problem. More than half believe it's a very big problem. And of course, children and youth falling behind because of barriers that prevent them from regularly attending school is a big problem for 76% of the voters surveyed. It must be noted that in this last item, this item may be propped up by voters who are thinking about remote learning during the pandemic, which is a top concern about Republicans. They're very concerned about remote learning and how it's working out, not working out. There is also a strong second-tier concerns around the struggles children and youth have with basic needs, trauma, poverty, learning supports. This really resonates with voters, the fact that individual children are suffering and struggling, and it's worth noting to people that these are struggles that individual children in your areas are dealing with. It resonates with them. And in this next slide, where investment should be made. Patrick, can you go to slide 4? Okay, there we go. Top areas are access to jobs and skill training programs in community college. This is very important among voters. 85% support, including 67% strongly support investing in youth and children in their jobs and skill training programs in community colleges. Now, this is important because out of school time programs are expert at helping kids explore career options and giving them opportunities to learn about skill development. It's important to promote because this really resonates strongly with voters. Programs aimed at improving children's mental health are very highly supported, 83%, and programs that reduce involvement in the juvenile justice system are also very high by 82%. Now, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, which is a very big supporter of out-of-school time programs, knows this well, and it's important to note that you're doing a good job in getting that message out. Also, affordable childcare, as you can see, and after-school programs provide school-age childcare is also highly supported among voters who are willing to make investments at 78%. what the pollsters found in a nutshell was that voters support a range of specific programs and services that aimed at helping children and young people more broadly and intensely, even than the central question of increasing investments. And it's very clear that career-oriented and mental health programs garner the most intense support, while programs around safety, childcare, and keeping kids out of crime also performed really well. When specifically asked about out-of-school time programs and experiences for older youth that provide career exposure and skill building, 86% said they support that, and 67% said they support it strongly. So that's right up your wheelhouse. And among those with political affiliations, there were strong majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents supporting programs and aimed at out-of-school time experiences, career exposures for older youth, as well as mental health work. In the poll work, we found that when pollsters stimulated and engaged debate in these issues, we actually gained support, both in overall terms as well as in intensity. And what this means is that as you raise arguments in favor of why your programs and services are important in helping individual children in your districts do well, it tends to persuade people. So that's encouraging news, I think, for people in your line of work to talk about these issues and reach voters and constituents in your areas, because the more people learn about this stuff, the stronger they feel about it. So overall, voters really want to see greater investments that ensure fewer children will experience abuse and neglect, will help young people better prepare for the workforce, and will help improve Michigan's economy, and also will help children with their mental health needs and decrease numbers of youth in the juvenile justice system. So, that in a nutshell, what voters really want is for children and young people to succeed. And that's what we need to talk about with the things that you do so well. And we just want to show them how they can do that. And I think that's very hopeful. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And I think I did include this slide. Terry had, we've been going back and forth. There's a lot of rich information here. And so I did include this slide. I don't know, Terry, if you wanted to talk about this at all.
Okay, yeah. What I wanted to touch on was, it was a very long poll. It generated about a 20-minute response time with each respondent. And we did drill down in some particular areas. And when we asked people to identify problems, we gave people a list of about 17 different problem areas. And we asked people to listen to those and identify what was most important to them. So the things that I pulled out were things that I thought were of particular interest to you, which is that not one of the problem areas was this: not every student gets the learning support that they need to succeed. 78% agreed that this was a problem, compared to 18% who said it wasn't a problem. Too few opportunities to build real world success skills. That again is right up your wheelhouse. 72% said that this was a problem. Inadequate access to enrichment and learning opportunities after school and in the summer that can provide academic help, career exploration, safe spaces, and connections to caring adults. 67% said this was a problem. Children and youth, and finally, children and youth falling behind in school because of learning losses during COVID, which resonated very strongly with voters. 87% said this was a problem. So as we focus on the things that people are concerned about, we likewise want to focus on how we can bring solutions to those problems. And you all have those solutions through the work that you do. So thank you for bringing up this slide, because I think that really did point to things that were pretty central to what everyone here is about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Terry. And
Thank
we
you.
wanted to share that information as really a grounding for today's discussion. When we talk about before or after school programming, out of school time in Michigan, there are a few different lenses that at Michigan's Children that we're cognizant of. And in two veins really, is that there are public school providers that are providing these services, and certainly there are community and nonprofit-based providers as well. And as we talk about investment areas and we talk about coordination, what we'd like to see is that coordination between those service providers. I'd like to talk a little bit about the public education providers and then turn it over to my colleague Erin at Mass to talk about the nonprofit and community. But on the public education side, one of the key partners that we work with very strongly is McKay, the Michigan Association of Community and Adult Education. They have a number of providers that provide before and after school programming, summer programming, situated within school districts. Those districts or those specific programs do not receive any general fund support from public schools. We've got a wonderful colleague of mine, Brian Puffer, that I'm sure can speak to that when we get to the panel discussion. But they provide programming to local, county, regional partners and families within a certain area. And they really do work alongside their K-12 partners to meet the needs of families. They're involved in decision-making at the district level. They are involved in community discussions about where resources should be heading and where they can go. And they really do play an integral part in really kind of connecting the dots when it relates to families within that community. They often rely on community-based local grants, programming revenue from their various programs, delivery of service in order to generate staffing and order increase programs. In some isolated areas, there is a millage that may be as a part of the school district's funding model that also does support their community education programming. That is a rarity, and it's something that I think we would love to see expanded and different opportunities. And then certainly some of our programs receive, maybe some local grants or other statewide grants that they write for. Really, kind of wrapping up this discussion on the public school side is that they really are key pillars of their community, and they're recognized spaces where families can go to for guidance, for programming, for expertise. In many cases, they have a strong social media presence, which is distinctly different from the district that they're a part of, and they try to promote their individual programming that they have. And I would say that has become very important and very apparent throughout the pandemic, as we saw COVID-19 just really kind of totally sideline much of our in-person meetings, let alone any of our in-person programming that was happening. And so many of our programs that we saw that are in the public school split to a hybrid or shared model so that they were able to deliver those services in a keen way. Many have part-time or a small staff dedicated to this programming. And that's something that I'm sure all of us are familiar with when we look at our nonprofit agencies as well. But they really provide key legacy programmings and that are important to the community. When we talk about such things as robotics or family programming, sports and recreation, driver's education, summer programming, out of school enrichment for youth, adults, and families. We have many different providers that also do summer school, credit retention courses for K-12 students. They might do community-based programs like your Halloween parades and your, other district-approved extracurricular field trips and things of that nature. And so there's kind of a wide swath and a wide variety of the resources that they have and that they're responsible for. And so it's important as we talk about after school that we're including both our public school and our nonprofit entities in that conversation. And so that's something that we've committed to at Michigan Children. I'm going to turn it over to Erin from the Michigan After School Partnership to talk a little bit about community and nonprofit-based after-school programming. So I'll stop sharing so she can. Go ahead, Erin.
Awesome. Can you guys see my screen? Fantastic. Thanks so much to Michigan's Children for having me today, as well as for discussing this topic. Really appreciate it. Real briefly, before I get into the thick of things, just want to take a second just to remind folks about the Michigan After School Partnership and who we are and what we do. We are very much a coalition that is dedicated to making sure that all youth in the state have access to quality out of school time programs. And we do that through our advocacy efforts, through our quality efforts. We're working with professional development to make sure that programs are of the highest quality, as well as through our communications work when we're talking about who we are as a field, what we are as a field, as well as mobilizing the field itself. We have a pretty bold 3-year practical vision in that we want to make sure that we have grassroots mobilization to ensure that we have significant funding to go into the field for out of school time programs. We've had some success initially with community-based organizations, as well as there has been some school-based program funding provided as well, but we're continuing to work with the state to ensure that this is something that happens on an annual basis. Patrick gave a quick little a piece of an overview, I should say, of out of school time. And I just wanted to add to that, if I may. When we talk about the definition of out of school time, we are talking about before, after, and summer learning. And the reason this is so important is because, as folks know, youth actually spend 80% of their time not in school. Just so folks know, the settings can be private and public facilities as well. Providers can be national groups, local groups, faith-based organizations, school districts, community education, as Patrick mentioned, parks and recreation, municipalities, and for-profit groups. And I just want folks to know that as MAS, we represent all of those. In terms of funding for the out-of-school time programs, it really varies. Some may have tuition fees or a sliding scale for tuition fees. 21st century learning centers, there's some business support, some foundation support, and of course, individual support as well. And you can see the activities here. I will say what is key for all out of school time programs is certainly that having that learning component, that social emotional component, as well as that physical component. And then you can see the other areas that we have that a lot of out of school time programs offer. And oftentimes when we think of out of school time, we think just as the younger, right? This younger school age. But it's really important to make sure that you're thinking about this from also a middle school and high school perspective, because these programs are just as essential for them, as I'll go into in a minute. So just to piggyback actually off of what Terry mentioned in terms of the investments and where people are interested in investing in youth, what we like to say is out of school time is really essential in all of these key areas. A lot of times we think about out of school time only from an education perspective, but it is so much more. And first of all, it's obviously the childcare piece. We know that for working parents to be working, they need to make sure that their school age children are also being looked after, which is what after school and summer programs and before school programs can really be key for. We know particularly that 90% of parents say that programs have been essential in making sure that they're able to keep their jobs and keep working. We saw during the pandemic, and we're still in the pandemic, right? But back when kids were in remote learning mode, we saw all these programs really step up and really offer their spaces when the schools were closed to make sure that youth had somewhere to go to support their learning, to support their social emotional. And these programs are continuing to do so. Education is key. We know that the youth that participate in out of school time programs have higher math and reading scores and higher overall GPAs. Really, frankly, we always say that out of school time is our community is a huge partner with K-12. We are a huge partner with schools. We are a collaborator. We know that schools cannot do everything on their own. Again, youth spend 80% of their time not in school. And that's where these out of school time programs really step up. Also, as I mentioned, the emotional and physical well-being, we know again that students that participate in out of school time have better communication skills, have better self-confidence, relationship skills. We know that that's so critical right now, social skills that a lot of the youth are really struggling with, particularly after and during the pandemic. And of course, we also know that youth will often have improved fitness and nutritional habits. Another piece, as I mentioned earlier, is that out of school time isn't just K through 5, right? We have to remember that the 6 through 12 as well, right? And although maybe that child care piece isn't as essential in that, the education piece still is, the emotional, physical well-being still is, and the college readiness really is. These out of school time programs at the higher levels are really having a great impact in terms of a positive impact on making sure that the youth in their programs go to college. And then taking it a step further, we're finding that those youth actually are more likely to graduate from college. The other piece that applies, particularly for the older youth that we see, is the workforce development. And workforce development, economic development is so key right now. As folks know, we know that these out of school time programs and the youth that participate in them tend to make great gains in terms of STEM career readiness. Frankly, their soft skills, their employability, relationship skills. They also have great youth. They show great leadership skills and conflict resolution, etc. And it gives them a chance, frankly, to try different types of things. There's the workforce development in terms of teaching them and talking about, the relationship skills, but also we have a lot of out of school time programs that are actually where youth are able to get in and to get into an industry and have entrepreneurship experiences. So there's really a lot of opportunities there. So to boil it down, again, we know that youth that are involved in these programs, and this is across the board, can gain self-confidence and social skills, make gains in reading and math, improve school attendance, and as well as work habits, and have higher graduation rates. So that's great. We know out of school time programs are an amazing partner, right, with our schools and our communities, but we have a gap. For every child in Michigan that's in an after-school program, we know that we have at least 4 that are waiting to get in. And a recent landscape scan that we conducted, a data project that we did with Public Policy Associates, even showed us, unfortunately, that gap is worse than we realized. There are a lot of youth that do not have access to our out-of-school time programs. Right now, we know that we have a statewide youth to provider ratio of 376 youth to 1 provider. In Southeast Michigan, that ratio is significantly worse. It's 531 youth to 1 provider. So we're finding most often the folks that are left behind are unfortunately our BIPOC students and youth, and those who are really struggling in terms of low income at home. I will say with this data project, just so folks know, we did locate 4,700 providers across the state, and that does include the broader group that I mentioned, umbrella that I mentioned earlier, in terms of schools, in terms of community education, parks and recreation, community-based organizations, the Ys, Boys and Girls Clubs, etc. We're in the process right now of entering an agreement with 211 so that folks will be able to actually find out of school time programs. Parents will be able to find out of school time programs simply by calling 211 or looking at their website. So what are the possibilities? Again, we know that, we have great impact, right? There's so much that we can do with out of school time. We have the evidence-based research to show what the impact of our programs, but we have a huge gap, right? We know that we need to start looking at making sure that we have a larger investment in these out of school time programs, because we do want to make sure that we're investing in the citizens of tomorrow, right? So that they're engaged in learning, they're hopeful, they're supported, they're safe, and they're resilient. This is an example of, and if you go to our website, and I'll put it in the chat box after this call, you can see these maps that really show the deserts that we have, as well as where we have more concentration of providers. Excuse me. You can see definitely as you get further north that we are experiencing significant deserts in terms of programs that are offered for our youth. So I alluded to this earlier, but the opportunity that exists right now, we have been fortunate to get some funding already in terms of some federal funds, some COVID relief dollars, as well as some state funds in this last round. And however, we are cognizant that we need to make sure that we are able to do a real boost. We need a real boost for the out of school time field so that we are able to make sure that youth have access to these critical programs. And so what we're asking for is $100 million out of the American Rescue Plan. It is possible for a portion of that with local and state recovery dollars to go to this field. We're really looking at this again as a growth opportunity for our field, as well as a post-recovery effort for the youth. Particularly, these funds would be utilized for one, startup of new programs, because again, remember, we don't have enough. Our ratio, there's 376 youth to one provider. That's way too many. Even worse in Southeast Michigan. So we need to start up more programs, but we also need to enhance our existing programs so that they are able to serve more youth and have more locations. And then third, a portion of that funds would go towards capacity building so that we're looking at workforce development so that we're able to, again, ensure that programs are like Rebecca's, like Brian's, that they are high quality across the state and that we are all at the same level and they have the professional development that they need, but then also that we have the support for professionalism of our workforce, as well as promoting, more folks actually working in the field. So I talked really fast. Did I go over my 5 minutes, Patrick?
You were so great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise and leadership in this area and just being a great partner with us. We are going to pivot a little bit and build off of both what Terry has said and Aaron. And we have an wonderful expert panel, in addition to Aaron being the executive director at the Michigan After School Partnership. We have Rebecca Jakovsky, project director for 21st Century Learning of the Sparks program. And she'll talk a little bit about her program in a moment. And then Brian Puffer is the director of community education at Saline area schools. And really, we were intentional about picking these individuals because they're leaders in the after-school community as we look across the landscape, have robust programs, really are dialed in to many of the key talking points that Aaron alluded to today. And so let's dive right in. Welcome to you all three. We so appreciate and value your time and you joining us. And as you respond to the first question here, I wonder if you can welcome yourself, maybe share a little bit about your program. But the first question for you on the docket is, what are some of the most pressing issues facing out of school time providers? Rebecca and Brian are themselves providers. And within that, what are some of the bright spots? You know, I think we could talk extensively about many of the challenges, but what are some of the bright spots that we're seeing as we continue to transition out of COVID-19 implications? So let's start with you, Rebecca, if you would respond to that question for us.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. Again, my name is Rebecca Jakovsky. I am the project director for out of school time programs. We provide after school during the school year, and in the summer, we provide a 6-week summer program. We currently have 13 sites that are fully funded with the 21st Century federal funds. And we range from elementary through high school programming. So some of the facets of the pressing issues that are facing us right now, for many of the areas across our communities, out of school time providers are looking for staff. So we are experiencing some staff shortages. We are also experiencing a lot of transition. So the staff that we are able to find and hire are in need of a lot of professional development to meet the needs and the high quality status of our programs. We also have licensing and safety ratios. So we're facing a challenge right now of having students on waiting lists and families who are interested but are not able to become part of our programs because we just don't have the staff. And so we may have lower enrollment in our programs than we're used to, but we are facing a ratio issue. Some of the bright spots, I think there are a lot of bright spots coming out from the implications of COVID. So it's really clear that we're valued, that we're needed, and that we're meeting the needs for the students that we're able to have in our programs and meeting the needs of our community. Many of those pieces that Erin mentioned of families who need that stability so that they're able to work. We're meeting the needs of meals for our students, the homework help, the childcare, helping the older students with credit recovery so they're able to graduate high school on time, offering all grade levels experiences through field trips and other kinds of hands-on learning where they're able to learn more about a career or an interest. So we also, at our programs, found that when we initially were experiencing COVID and students went to remote learning in our rural areas, we had a lot of folks who did not have internet. So that was a real challenge for us on how do we meet our students. It was never a question of, can we meet their needs? Can we still connect with them? We just needed to know how. And so our whole team got together. We created wonderful enrichment bags that we packed. We partnered with our school service and our food service, and they provided us meals, and we put our meals together with our enrichment opportunities and all the supplies students would need. And we hopped on buses and we delivered over 550 bags every week throughout the whole summer program 2 years ago. And we found that parents were looking forward to seeing our bus coming down the road. Students were looking forward to seeing our bus, and it was actually the highlight of our week too. And so when we got back to in-person learning, we realized that was something we didn't want to stop, that connection with families, providing those enrichment pieces. And so now when we have breaks, like we have a holiday break coming up here, we still pack those bags and we focus on enrichment opportunities for students and families. So we want to really promote those family engagement experiences and give those positive opportunities for students and their families and their parents to interact. So there might be like a baking lesson in there, a book to read before bedtime, some sort of a puzzle or a game to put together, as well as really simple instructions. So that was one of the areas where we thought, we love this, we see the need for it, we see the positive outcomes of it, and we didn't want to lose that.
Thank you, Rebecca. That sounds wonderful.
Brian?
Brian, how about you? Welcome, Brian.
Sure.
Hey. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, for having me. My name is Brian Puffer. I'm the Community Education Director for Saline Schools. We have a before and after care program at 4 of our elementary schools, and we have a large summer program that we run at one of our elementary schools during the year. We have about 400 kids in a before and after care program. In our summer camp, we average this summer about 75 kids per day in our camp. The issue that's facing us is what Rebecca said, it's staffing. Staffing is our issue right now, is making sure we have enough staff here to run our program. And obviously we have a certain amount of numbers with licensing that we have to hit. We can only have so many kids with our staff. And so we're struggling right now to provide enough. We have a lot of people on the wait list right now because we don't have enough staff to offer as much care as we'd like to. Another thing is we offer a lot of recreation enrichment after school programs, like after school basketball. Then we have our enrichment classes as well. We've had instructors not come back after COVID. Went virtual. A lot of them went virtual, and some people want to stay virtual and don't want to come back. And so because a lot of those were either teachers or now the teachers that are retired. And so it's trying to find those staff that want to come back and then go back into our schools and offer our programs, because our after school programs take place at the elementary schools right after school's out. So it's so the parents don't have to take their kids somewhere else for the programming. So those are the two things that really facing. And a bright spot would be, kind of like Rebecca talked about, we had a program called Hornet Homeroom. Last year in 2020, we started our first 3 weeks as all virtual. And so we provided this program for at-risk kids to come to the school and access their online learning. And what was really neat about it is that we staffed that with community education staff, with our transportation staff, with our food service staff, because everybody was being paid, but some of them didn't have anything to do. And so it was really neat to see have all these different people in the district working towards one common goal. And one quick story I had is we had one at-risk student who would only talk to this one employee and do his schoolwork, and that employee was one of our bus drivers, which was great. That never would ever happen before it wasn't COVID. So while COVID was horrible, there was some nice stories we had.
Right. It's great to see the community coming together at a perilous time for sure. Erin, how about you? What are you seeing as some of the most pressing issues for providers and some of the bright spots too?
Yeah, I would certainly say staffing continues to be a significant issue. And then we're also seeing that, there are some situations. So, for example, we're programs that operate in schools when schools shut down, right, for COVID related or staffing issues. We're seeing problems with the programs being able to continue in terms of we're having to find an offsite location. I would certainly say that in terms of the issues, I think that, or what, maybe a bright spot, I should say, in terms of something that came out of the pandemic was, I think it really elevated the importance of out of school time. Folks really started to realize the importance of these programs from a learning perspective, from a social emotional perspective, et cetera. But they also started learning, and we started seeing that, we have about 60,000 youth that we know are, for lack of a better term, missing, right? The schools haven't been able to locate them, or they're not engaged back in the schools. And we're finding that the out of school time programs are actually a really good way to bring those bring those youth back into the community. We know programs that have been able to, throughout the pandemic, maintain contact with youth, throughout the week. And that is really, we're finding that really critical as we try to re-engage and, as youth begin to continue to go back to school again.
Appreciate that. Kind of building off of that, asking you all as the panel, what are really some of the pressing issues that you're seeing families face? We often hear that out of school time providers in many ways are a second home for children and for youth and for families to go to, and they become very embedded within their community in which they are providing services. So what are some of those really apparent issues that you've seen families and parents and even children as they walk through your doors, or if you've engaged with them virtually? I don't know if there's a virtual door that they have entered through. What are really some of those top challenges that you think? Let's start with you, Brian, and then do Erin and Rebecca.
Yeah, our top challenge really is, we live, we're Saline, we're located next to Ann Arbor, and people just think we don't have, at-risk students or students that still struggle financially, and we do. And our problem right now is we know there's kids out there, and we're trying to get them in the doors, but we have lack of space right now because of staffing. And right now, really what's happening, and I'll be honest with you, in the last week since the vaccine was approved for 5 to 11-year-olds, we filled almost all of our before and after care spots because people are becoming more confident to send their kids to, the program when they can be vaccinated. And so while it's great for us number-wise and financially, we're struggling to meet that need because one, it was just lack of staff. And then two, though, is like we also are working with these parents who don't have the funds to put their kids in their after-school program. So we're working with our social service department, and our administration's been more involved since COVID too, to try to get these kids into our program. And so those are the kind of issues that we're facing right now that we see.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo in terms of what Brian said, certainly, the staffing issue, we're seeing issues with licensing, but we're also, transportation continues to be a huge issue. So the programs that I think have been able to continue to engage with youth are those that are located right in the family's neighborhood, so that it is easy to get to. But we're continuing to have problems with student access of the programs because transportation isn't necessarily there. And I think those are really the biggest issues. I think that families are struggling with pain, right? I think, as Brian mentioned, that continues to be a concern. That is why we're continuing to push, and I know Michigan's Children is as well, the recent childcare stabilization grants that are available, at least for school-age providers that are licensed. We want to continue to make sure that programs are applying for that, so they have some funds, but that also, we're continuing to look at what are ways that we're able to look at staffing perhaps a little bit differently, in terms of are there ways that we can engage perhaps more of our older youth, particularly helping out with some of the younger school age programs. So we're trying to be creative, but overall, those are the big issues.
In addition to working from home, right here, and trying to do everything that we're responsible for. Thank you for that. Rebecca, how about you?
Yes, thank you. So one of the pressing issues for our families is really, we know that many of them are facing instability both in their homes, in their work, and worrying about reliable childcare is really of the utmost importance for them, which is something that we strive to provide. Additionally, families always have
I think I may have lost you, Rebecca. I'm not sure if anyone else did.
Yeah.
That's okay. We will circle back to you, Rebecca, and we'll move on here in our discussion. Apologies for that. Hope she's doing well.
Patrick,
Yep, go ahead, Terry.
while we wait for Rebecca to come back, Victoria Kavanaugh has a comment about the issue of getting back as an outside agency, getting back into the school setting, and Aaron referred to that. That I wonder if anyone could comment on how to deal with that issue.
Yeah, I can kind of comment on that. Luckily, our facilities, we opened up our facilities to the public in July of 2020 because our administration wanted to get people back in the building. But I can tell you there's a lot of districts that we are neighbors with that are not allowing outside facilities or outside organizations to use their facility. And we have been getting just slammed with requests here in Saline from from Ann Arbor and all over Dexter and whatnot, because we have our facilities that are open, and we don't have space to give anybody, and just because we're so full. And I think it's a huge problem right now that if you're an outside organization that needs access to a school, a lot of them are closing their doors right now, not letting anybody in. So it's a large problem for sure.
Yeah, it is a huge issue. And it's something that we're really looking at in terms of kind of from a top down, bottom up, grass tops as well as grassroots kind of level. And that we're having conversations with a lot of the K-12 groups, particularly the administrative associations, really to look at how can we convey to superintendents and to principals that, frankly, our out of school time programs, we are key partners, right? So we're not an outside agency that's trying to come in. We are a key partner with you, collaborator, and really working to kind of change that dialogue so that they're thinking about that a little bit differently. And then also we're really encouraging and promoting as much as possible for programs to really be making sure that, and I'm sure that all of you are, but really different ways to approach things with our superintendents, having the conversations themselves, right? Versus just us having it from the grass tops level, but really looking at strengthening those partnerships on the local level. I think another thing that's come to light out of the pandemic is that we've kind of seen the education and we've seen out of school time programs operated in silos a lot of the time. So we need to figure out a way to make sure that our out of school time programs are really viewed as part of this ecosystem as well, and are viewed as this key partner and key collaborator, so that we don't have these issues in the future. But we know that building partnerships and building relationships takes a while. Right. And it's not something that happens overnight. So, we're really trying to continue to encourage that, but also make sure that we're understanding and looking at perhaps if there are other places for programs to operate as well, and working with key partners like United Way, like community foundations and others to really look at if there are other facilities that might be available in municipalities that these programs can go into if they can't go into the schools.
Such a great segue, Erin, as we talk about local, regional, and statewide advocacy and what some of those conversations have been. I know that all of you are advocates in your own right for not only for your programs, but for just the entire field and landscape of after school programming. Rebecca is back with us, and welcome back, Rebecca. So I wonder if you all could talk about this a little bit. Maybe we'll start with you, Rebecca, and then work our way to Brian and Erin. What have some of those conversations been like for you at the local, regional, statewide, or national levels? And where have they landed, and kind of what's the trajectory of those conversations as they relate to articulating some of the challenges that you're seeing for your provider, for you as a provider, for your families, but also some of the opportunities that lie ahead?
Yes, thank you. And I do apologize about my connectivity issue there. So many of our conversations at all levels, both within our school districts as well as on state boards that I participate, we've been talking about really meeting the quality basics in our offerings and in our supports. So we know that there's a strong need for those wraparound supports, the transportation issue, the meals, the foods, the after school care, as well as that career and college readiness and the academic supports. So we've been talking a lot, I've been hearing a lot about going back to the basics, going back to the foundations in a very purposeful, planned way. So making sure that those environments are safe and supportive for students, emotional safety, quality spaces where those SEL, social emotional learning aspects can be addressed and reached for our students. We also look at our funding levels and the need for funding. In our programs, we provide 100% free no tuition for all of our students, their families, their school districts or communities. None of them have to partner. We partner with in-kind services. We have a lot of strong partnerships, as Erin was attesting to the importance of that. We partner with like our career tech students. So we have some students who are working on education to promote their work skills. We partner with our community mental health workers who can come in and lead programming and some exercises for students on how to handle their emotional needs. We partner with our MSU extension offices. And so really looking at ways that we can integrate ourselves into our communities and integrate ourselves into other networks of state initiatives. So that way we can, one, get the funding that we need for this quality program, and also have those partners to be part of this need, this vital need for students and for their families.
Brian.
Oh, okay. On our end, like, we're a little different, obviously, with the public school district, and we are funded through our rec millage and our self-revenue. So our funding sources are a little different. We're very lucky to have that. But we have been working closely with our social service department and our administration, meeting together to try to figure out, how can we service our at-risk kids, and not so much our at-risk kids too, is we're looking at kids. We had a couple of summer programs we ran this summer in conjunction with our social service department to provide some funding for these kids, for kids that struggled last year academically that typically don't. And so we identified these students, and we reached out to them to get to this programming and to funding. So to do that, obviously we had to have some type of funding for allow these students to take these programs. So really what we've been doing here is working with our social service department, but also what we've been doing is reaching out to our other community education departments that are located around us to kind of get a feel what they've been doing, what's working, not reinventing the wheel. If something's working in Dexter, we can do that in Saline. And so it's just kind of been reaching out, one, to see how everybody's doing and what's been working for you. And, can we bring that to our school district and, help our kids as well.
Yeah, just, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, were you calling on me?
Yeah, yes, yeah, so you're good.
So definitely, as Rebecca, also mentioned, she's a part of our mass policy work, and, we do obviously have these big statewide pushes to look for and to make sure we have funding for out of school time programs across the state. And as I said, we've had some success so far, but we have that $100 million ask with the American Rescue Plan. And I didn't mention, but we'll also be continuing to ask for funding in the state budget as well, to make sure that that is something that we have on an annual basis, again, with the idea that we are an essential part of the ecosystem, and that whole child development, includes out of school time. And I think we've been, in terms of how have these discussions been received, I think they've been actually received really well. So far here in the state, we have a great champion in Chairman Thomas Albert. He is the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And so he has been amazing. And but we're continuing to grow those champions as well. And continuing to work more, we're hoping at, as I mentioned, we're looking at that grass tops level as well as the grassroots level. I'm really looking at empowering the programs, the providers and partners that we work with to really be working on this from a local regional perspective as well, to look at funding opportunities as well as other collaborative opportunities with local officials.
I'm sorry, Patrick, if I could just add to, just to piggyback off Aaron, we've had several positive experiences with legislators. We've had visitors to our programs, both local at the state level, and many who sit in Washington, D.C. come to our programs to learn more about them. We've had after school at the Capitol Day for several years, where students come and they walk through the Capitol. They're honored from both the Senate and the House floors. We have testaments written from these same legislators. So we're so fortunate to have the support, the bipartisan support from many of these folks, and the opportunity to help them learn more about our programs and how we serve students and communities. And so really, I think that moving those pieces forward for us is more important than ever as we face these funding opportunities.
Absolutely. In our remaining minutes, I so appreciated this conversation. Where do you all see the trajectory of out of school time programming? What are some of the trends that you're keeping an eye on? I building off what you just said, Rebecca, Brian was a part of a collaborative conversation at our partners, McKay. They had their annual conference and they had a whole discussion and invited superintendents and other advocates around before and after school care and out of school time programming. So I think conversations like that are going to continue to be important to just remain relevant and to continue to share the relevancy and the importance of these programs. But where else are you seeing the trajectory of programming? Let's start with you, Rebecca, and then go to Aaron and Brian.
Yes, well, I see us becoming a more expected and a more integrated part. So I mentioned many of the community partnerships that we've grown throughout COVID out of necessity that we've really come to value, and they've come to learn more about us and what we do. So I really see us becoming a more integrated, expected, widespread offering, across the state. I also see us becoming even more relevant and a partner in those enriching opportunities for career and college readiness, for ensuring that students learn more about those opportunities before they have a plan for where it is that they're going to go to school, or what kind of career tech opportunities they're going to have. So really looking to us as a valued partner in a student's growth and education.
Yeah, well said, Rebecca. I mean, I think that the future is, I look at it from the state perspective as well as from a local perspective, and really hoping that, that map that I showed earlier where we had so many light blue or white spaces, which indicates the desert, I'm hoping in 10, 15 years that all of those are dark blue, that we really have a good amount of programs that are offered, that we really have make sure that we're able to make sure that our youth have access to these quality programs. And I do, from a statewide perspective, see us, in maybe the next 5 years being viewed as key partners with the state, key partners with K-12 groups, with business groups, with foundations, key partners in general with, communities, just to make sure that we are furthering our whole child development, and that we are moving on the childcare front, the education front, the social emotional front, the college readiness front, and the workforce development front, and that we're key players in all of that.
Let me go next. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I just want to echo what Rebecca said. We're more expected, and we're more of an integral part. I could say that for community ed for sure. Since COVID hit, they're kind of realizing, well, we've always been here, but we're always kind of in the, in the shadows, and we do what we do, but now we're seeing that we can be even more beneficial to the district. So we're meeting with administration quite a bit. We're offering after school programs, we're looking at mental health and stuff like that for students. And so, like she said, we're more of an integrated part now in our district. And they've always saw that, but we know this pandemic, because we did a lot of programming. Our community education department, we were the first boots on the ground after COVID hit. We were back in the schools in June of 2020, as soon as we could allow programming again. So, we were the first ones on the ground. And so we got, a lot of publicity because of that. And, it kind of shed some light on things that we can do. But I think everybody sees our program as something that's very beneficial for the students, and obviously, like I said, I kind of echo what Rebecca said that.
Really appreciate that. Thank you all for being here, Brian and Aaron and Rebecca. So appreciate your expertise and your knowledge. If you wouldn't mind just dropping your emails into the chat box here before we leave. Have so appreciated this conversation, and this is the one of many ongoing. I know we've got much movement in this area, and we'll continue to convene with these opportunities for all of us to come together to talk about the importance of after-school programming. A few tokens of information to leave you with as we wind down our time is that don't forget to download our podcast, Speaking for Kids. We've got a more comprehensive episode, if you will, on the poll that Terry mentioned earlier today, and save the date for our next Lunch and Learn, the last one of 2021. Can you believe it? We're coming to the end of the year. Wednesday, December 15th at noon. It'll be a retrospective on all of the policy wins and all of the policy impact that we have had on kids, youth, and families in 2021. Again, on behalf of Terry Bannis and myself here at Michigan's Children, I'd like to thank Brian and Aaron and Rebecca for their time, all of you for listening. We'll see you back soon in December. Thank you so much.
Patrick, if I could just make a final word. So on our Lunch and Learn page on our website, there is a link to a partners packet for the poll that we did with messaging information, with frequently asked questions about the poll that might be helpful as you start talking about the need for funding for after school. So I'm dropping that link into the chat, and that information is uploaded now. Also, I didn't get a chance to mention it, but I'm going to put this in the chat. We did some polling on messaging and convincing arguments that seemed to work well. And here's one that resonated on after school itself and out of school time. And I'm dropping that messaging into the chat so that you can read it and copy it, but basically says what we've been talking about today, that, high quality programs are in demand, families value them, but thousands can't afford them. People sacrifice to pay for them, and we must invest in after school. So final thoughts. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.